Coming up, the team embark on their penultimate day of my week-long photo challenge. I get shown how to get started in wildlife photography. We take to the streets to show you how to photograph strangers in a foreign land. And we show you an affordable way to take amazing panoramic film shots. Welcome to another episode of Photography Online. This month I am bringing you the show from this charming Spanish town, which I'll tell you more about later, but I know many of you appreciate it when we get straight to the point, so let's get the show going. Some of the team are nearing my 7-day deadline on their race around the UK as they attempt to shoot all 15 UK national parks in just 1 week. Now, last time they had to shoot 3 parks in the same day to make up for lost ground due to bad weather. With only 2 days to go, can they stay on track to deliver me the 15 photos I need for our 2025 calendar? As always, Accura's watches are timekeeping for us, so thanks to them for their support. Okay, I think it's time.
Previously on the National Parks Challenge.
I have come up with a new challenge for you if you're up for it.
Challenge always sounds good. Get out of the way, come on, move. Stupid bloody beach.
There we go. Almost good as new, that. Do you like the colour?
Some of us are trying to rest in amongst this
all, I know, well,
squalor.
Anyway.
So I had to wobble the camera to close the shutter.
What? Who designed that?
Someone in Japan.
We treated ourselves to our first lie-in, largely because we needed it, but also because this location doesn't work until later in the morning.
Well, here we are in the South Downs. So we're at the southernmost point of our journey, which is a bit of a milestone considering we started at the far north. So we've done our north to south. South? Do you like that?
South.
It's because we've just been through Essex. Yeah. It's rubbed off on me. So now we need to do is our east to west, having done west to east yesterday. Yeah. We need to go back, and we're on the home straight, literally.
It doesn't look like much at all now, does it? Just these little
just got 4 to go, and so far, I mean, without looking at the images as a collective, I'm feeling fairly good about it.
Well, we'll wait and see what the results are like. Mm-hmm. Got all your filmed process, yeah?
Yeah, but I've got full confidence in that, of course.
Well, I'm glad.
The shot here, that's where we are.
Yep.
So this is the timeline. So we are at just after 9 o'clock. You can see the angle of the lights is just level with the cliffs now. Yep. So in the next hour, it's going to come round and it's just going to glance across them. And I reckon if we shoot into the lights, we'll just get a nice combination of highlight and shadow.
Shooting into the light in the middle of a sunny day is only for the brave. So, we left Marcus in the mobile HQ to start organising, reviewing and editing the shots of the trip so far.
James and I did a YouTuber rite of passage and walked through a gate. So far on this trip, we had seen the east coast and the west coast of the UK, but this was our first view of the south coast and it looked all the better for being in the spring sunshine.
Well, it's a bright day, Harry, put it mildly.
It's very bright. I mean, it's probably slightly too bright at the moment, but shimmering on the water, we're going to want that to ease off a little, wait for the sun to move around. Yeah. It's not far, it's just starting to kiss some of those middle cliffs, so...
It might just be giving things a little bit of time.
Well, we need time because we need something in the foreground at the moment. That's so far away and a little bit hazy that we need something defined and some depth to the shot. So
we're going to have a look at these lines of bushes and things like that as well.
Yeah, we'll find something. So we've got a bit of time.
Okie dokie, come on.
The iconic white chalk cliffs which make up the Seven Sisters are probably the landmark which comes to most people's minds when they think of the South Downs. Our plan was to get a classic shot in ideal light, but we needed something more than just the Seven Sisters, and it wasn't long before we found a good potential spot. We've got a little bit of foreground now at least. We've got some teasels, backlit nicely, which I know you'll like.
Yeah, big fan of the backlit stuff. Yeah, it is incredibly bright and really very hot. Yeah. For the first time in this entire... Do you think you've dried out at all? How are your feet?
Partly.
Even in super bright conditions like these, a tripod still comes in handy for fine-tuning composition, which is exactly what we needed to do here.
What's going on?
Well, when you come out expecting a telephoto shot, because a supposed expert tells you, this is what happens. So we're just making do.
Is this Heath Robinson?
A little bit, but look, it's fine. We can't see the screen. But
I can't see anything.
gimbal heads are great for long lenses, but not for a wide angle 16 to 35.
So it's all coming together now. We're completely sorted with the setup. We've got the composition sorted. Foreground's good, midground's good, background, but we could just do with a key element. And I reckon, Harry, that would be some people.
Yeah, we'll make this. It just needs a little bit of a focal point right on the grass.
A romantic couple, hand in hand, something like that.
We could do a self-portrait.
We're definitely not doing that. I'm going to go and sort somebody else out.
Right, get a move on, because the clouds are really nice. It wasn't long before James had charmed a couple of people into modelling for us. The light was now perfect, and after a couple of rehearsals, so that the people knew what line to follow, it was time to take the shot. I waited for them to get below the horizon and fired off a burst of shots to ensure I had one where the postures and limbs were working well as silhouettes.
Hopefully you'll agree that the inclusion of anonymous people in this shot gives it a much needed focal point, without stealing the show from the main subject, the South Downs National Park.
Turned out better than I thought it was going to be, actually.
Very good indeed. Right, should we go and find out where he is? And
yeah, well, we need to hit the road again, don't we?
We do, yeah, again.
12 down, 3 to go, and with a day and a half left on the clock. Our scratch map of the UK parks was starting to look almost complete, with the remaining 3 parks all reasonably close to each other. We were back on track and brimming with confidence. In fact, I thought it was about time to spice up the journey, literally, with a Carolina Reaper, the world's hottest chili pepper. Do you want any wasabi or anything, James?
No.
Okay, just, what about soy sauce?
Maybe like, I don't care.
Right. No, it's not the hot stuff anyway. I'll just give you a bit of soy sauce and a bit, like a little bit. Okay, time to see what effect this has. Wait for it. Wait for it. And there it is.
How much have you put on that?
One thing about the Carolina Reaper is that it's easy to cross-contaminate.
Oh, it's in my eye. I haven't even touched it.
Oh, it won't stop hurting.
I can't open my eyes. That's not helping. Oh no, it's running back in.
You're such a bellend. If we miss this shot...
Oh.
There's the face of a defeated man. Our journey to the next park, the New Forest, was a relatively short one, although I'm sure it will feel longer for some.
I could tell when we'd arrived in the New Forest, as I was surrounded by more asses and donkeys than usual. This was the first park we'd entered without a clear plan, so we did the obvious thing and just drove around for a while to get a feel for the place.
The problem was that although we were seeing potential subjects from the roadside, upon closer inspection, there was always a flaw with them, such as with this gnarly oak tree, which was beautiful in itself, but we just couldn't find a clean shot without distractions. We even tried a few cliched shots of the wild ponies, but despite James trying to add drama to the composition by laying on the floor, nothing we did was making these shots calendar-worthy.
The frustrating part was that the light was good, and we were wasting it by not knowing where to go. This is the problem with not having a plan, something we knew all too well, yet we had somehow fallen into the trap ourselves. All we could do was continue driving and hoping we would find something which worked before the end of the day. an event which was rapidly approaching. Eventually we spotted something which warranted further investigation. This silver birch tree certainly had the potential for a great shot, but would need some help from not only the light, but the sky too. It was the best subject we had seen in the New Forest so far, so rather than continuing to waste more time driving around, we committed to it and set about making it work.
We were putting all our eggs in one basket, gambling that this shot would be good enough, as there would be no other opportunity to get anything else from the New Forest.
James was clearly in a lying down kind of mood, probably because he was planning on asking Harry to check him for ticks later in the shower. I took a more mainstream approach and set up my 4x5 large format camera. Although I anticipated that the light would improve, the cloud behind the tree was great, so I exposed a sheet of Fuji Provia to capture the moment. Not wanting to shoot a load of 4x5 sheets at £10 a pop, I changed to a 6x9 medium format camera, which still gives lovely large images, but at a fraction of the cost of large format.
So the worst thing about this scene here is all this dead bracken, which, because of the time of year we're here, is probably the worst time of year for this foreground, because in another few weeks all the new green shoots would have grown up and kind of hid it. But the good thing about this light is it's so warm, and at the low angle it's kind of raking across, it actually kind of saves it, because there's so many different textures in it, and it's exactly the right tone for this light. So it's kind of balanced it out a little bit, so we've been kind of saved by that golden light.
Using medium format also opens up the opportunity to use other film stocks.
Well, I put Fuji Velvia in just to try and give this every chance it's got, but we need the light. I've got some shots with the camera up here.
It is actually going to come out again, hopefully.
I know, it will come out again, yeah. But by getting down low, I can get the bottom branches above the horizon and cunningly hide our motorhome behind the tree trunk.
Who parked that there?
No idea.
Yeah, should we blame Harry?
Yeah.
As he's in it?
Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
So we'll just wait for that light to come out again, get this shot.
Which is a few seconds away, fingers crossed.
Yeah, and then we can hit the road and head west.
Here's the medium format image taken on Fuji Velvia 50, which helps to punch up the colours and contrast. Personally, I prefer the earlier version on large format, as the cloud was much better. But let us know what you think in the comments.
With the New Forest scratched off the map, it left only 2 remaining parks, both in Devon, a 3-hour drive to the west. Now you might be wondering why we were leaving in this light. The truth is that we didn't want too many sunrise or sunset photos in the calendar, as they all start to look the same. Plus, tomorrow morning was going to be all about a colourful sunrise, so we were hoping these conditions would last a few more hours.
By the time we had arrived in our penultimate national park, Exmoor, it was dark. But we had our dawn location sorted and the weather forecast was looking good. So, rather than celebrate our final night in the motorhome with copious amounts of sex, drugs and rock and roll, we did the far more sensible, some might say middle-aged thing, of simply going to bed and falling asleep.
Next time on the National Parks Challenge...
Oh shit. We're waiting for the light to just put some colour in the clouds. The eyesore here is the gravel car park.
Yep. We've travelled from top to bottom of the country, east to west, 15 parks. Beautiful, every single one, I would say, would you not?
Absolutely.
Put your feet up. Oh.
So they only have 1 day remaining, and next month we'll find out if they were successful or not. Once again, thank you to Acura's watches for partnering with us to make the photo challenge possible. We gave away a couple of their flagship watches on last month's show, but if you'd like a final chance to win one, then all you need to do is join us for our PO Live show in a couple of weeks when we've got this one to give away. PO Live is exclusively for our official supporters, but you can join simply by pressing the join button or going to the relevant link in the video description. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about where I am. This is Albarracín, which is one of the many amazing locations that we visit during our annual Spain photo trip. We have been coming here for many years and it never fails to impress as it provides endless opportunities for photography. So far on this trip, we've spent a few days on the north coast doing some seascapes. We've eaten paella and we've now travelled down to our favourite town to conclude this year's trip. We now run all of our photography trips under Photography Online Adventures, so if you fancy joining us on one of these, check out the MC2 Photography website to see details of everything in the calendar. As the name suggests, we specialise in going to places which are off the beaten track. Just like here, we tend to stay well clear of all the cliches and the famous spots, as we prefer to do our photography without having to fight for position. Details of all our trips are in this, our annual magazine, aptly named Off the Beaten Track, which is available in both hard copy and digital download from our online shop. Alright, well, it is time for essential camera skills. This month, Harry was keen to show us how simple it is to get started in wildlife photography. All he needed was somebody with zero experience, but lots of interest and enthusiasm for learning the basics. Who could that be?
Wildlife photography can be one of the most exciting and rewarding genres of photography out there. For beginners, however, the challenges it presents can be quite intimidating. So if you've always wanted to give wildlife photography a go, but never quite known where to start, then let me give you a hand. In my experience, the barriers to wildlife photography come in two guises. The first of these is with gear and settings. The second is being the subjects themselves, essentially boiling down to fieldcraft. This is probably the most difficult aspect of wildlife photography and is equal parts research, skill and luck. There is no shortcutting fieldcraft. Putting in the time to get to know your subject and practicing is essential. We'll cover this in a future feature, but today it's all about the basics. Today I'm in the wonderful company of Ruth. Now, you obviously know your way around a camera, but you've never really tried much wildlife photography, is that right?
That's true, yes.
So what? Tell me why.
Tell me why. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is equipment, lens-wise. I just don't think I have what it needs. You see everybody with the giant lenses. Also, as a subject, it just looks quite tricky. Lots of fast-moving, you know, birds in flight, things like that. So I've never really given it a fair shot, to be honest.
That's fair enough. All right, well, what we're going to do today is we're going to run through really the basics, get everything set up, and hopefully get you something wildlife related.
Awesome. So what are we doing down here today, Harry?
Well, I brought us right up to the very north of Skye in the hope of finding some seabirds. We've got lots of sea cliff ledges all around us, and hopefully we should be able to find some shags, some guillemots, razorbills, anything really. They're a really accessible, nice wildlife photography subject to cut our teeth on and practice some key skills really.
So I've seen some little birds down here making interesting noises. What are these?
These are little black guillemots. They are one. There's not many of them around on Skye actually, so they're wonderful to see.
And they're quite stationary, so good for a beginner like me?
We can give it a go. It might be a little bit too far for some of the lenses we've got.
Okay.
But we'll see what we can get. So you mentioned just now about equipment and not really having a suitable lens. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier. I'm not going to delve too much into equipment really in this feature, other than saying what I think you need really minimum is a 300mm lens. So what I've got today for us to use is the 100 to 400mm zoom, and that should be perfect, nice and flexible, and gives us a bit of room for maneuver with how close we get to the birds.
The most useful focal range for bird photography is 300 to 600mm, so we're having to use the longer end of this telephoto zoom, but it's a good compromise between reach and weight.
So we've got a couple of birds down below us now. You can see there's a shag just, even a pair of them just peeping around the cliff. But a logical place to start is getting the camera set up properly. Now, primarily our concern with wildlife photography is getting a nice sharp shot. And unless we're getting particularly artsy-fartsy, we don't want any motion blur or anything else in the image. We just want a nice pin-sharp shot. So a nice sharp image is a combination of two factors. It's having the right exposure time, the shutter speed, and the correct autofocus settings. But it's the shutter speed, it's the #1 reason why I see people really binning their images or thinking they're not in focus. They just have an insufficient shutter speed.
So when you say like fast shutter speed, what are we talking?
I would probably want something in the region of 1,000th to 2,000th of a second, even for relatively static subjects.
So even when they're not in flight, even when they're on the rocks?
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't need that much, but if we can eliminate shutter speed as the variable that could be leading to an image that isn't sharp, then we don't have to worry about it. And when we've got plenty of light like we've got today, then we can easily achieve a fast shutter speed without compromising any of the other variables on the camera, basically.
Okay.
The rest of our exposure triangle revolves around maintaining our chosen exposure time. Generally, this means a wide aperture, usually as wide as our lens allows. The ISO will depend on how bright the day is. If you're lucky to be in Africa with plenty of sunshine, this might mean ISO 400. Here in gloomy Scotland, I usually have to be in the thousands. Don't be scared to crank this up if you need to, and don't be tempted to lower it and sacrifice your shutter speed. A noisy but sharp image is better than an unsharp, clean image.
So our next challenge then really is getting focused on our subject.
Yes.
This is probably the trickiest part of the whole process. Now, focusing methods vary massively depending on whether you're on an SLR like you've got or a mirrorless camera like I've got, but really for the time being we want to set aside any of the fancy tracking methods, eye detect and all the rest of it, because you simply can't beat mastering tracking and locking onto a subject yourself with the minimal number of focus points you need.
Okay, so what are we looking for?
So we want the camera to be continually autofocusing. So normally there are two modes to pretty much any camera: single shot or one shot focus, or continual. With the Canons it's called AI servo, but on most other cameras it's just continual autofocus, because we want it to constantly adjust to keep the subject nice and sharp. Next is then deciding how many focus points we want to use. That, I think, really boils down to how confident you're feeling and how well practiced you are. So the more practiced you get, the fewer number of focus points you can use. However, to keep things nice and simple, if we use a grouping of say 6 or 9 points in the middle to begin with, especially with subjects that are a little bit further away. If it's a nice, still, static subject though, and it isn't jumping around the frame, then we can just use a single focus point.
Okay.
That's going to be the most accurate and successful way of...
So that's something to aim towards, but start off with...
Yeah, start off, give yourself more room for manoeuvre, and then we can practice and narrow it down until we can get nice and confident with just one single focus point, and that would be the holy grail of focusing.
Okay.
Finally, I think the only other thing that we need to address technically is to ensure the camera's in high drive mode, so it's taking lots of pictures at a time.
Okay, yeah.
And really you just want to take way more pictures than you think you need. Believe me, you'll be amazed.
What's the ratio of sharp image to images taken?
Oh, I mean, it depends on what you're shooting.
For you and for the general.
For one-on-one, you know, I nail it every time. But no, you have to remember that you only see people's winning shots and the best, and you don't see the hundreds, especially if you're doing fast-moving subjects, which we'll probably talk about in a future episode. But
you can shoot hundreds or thousands of images and you'll only get one that's absolutely on the money. So take way more than you think you need, and that gives the autofocus half a chance at getting something just right.
Take comfort from that, take
But
hope from
I think
that.
that's as complicated as I think we need to make settings-wise. So why don't we put it into practice? Let's go, and we've got spurs down here, some behind us.
So a good one over there, yeah.
Let's see what we can get.
All right. So we've got loads of nice birds down here just on the edge of the rock, but it all seems to be about waiting and watching until they're in the right position. Things like the heads and the beaks got some nice separation against the ocean behind. So although there's lots here, still got to be pretty patient and try and wait for the right compositions.
Finally, the most important consideration when it comes to wildlife photography is that the subject's welfare always comes first. Wildlife photography can be incredibly rewarding, but only if you can leave the scene in the full knowledge that the animals haven't been stressed by your presence.
Feel free to get a little bit closer. I reckon we can sit on the edge just there. But if we start to see they're getting a bit stressed, or it looks like they're going to fly off of the cliff, then that's our cue just to back off a little bit.
Okay.
And even if it means we don't get the shot, that's just the game.
The birds come first.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many chicks down there.
That's amazing. I've never seen that many in one nest before. So you can see this one just in front of us here. And it's only just popping its head up from behind the rocks. But it means if we find the right position, just like landscape photography, any other genre, finding the right viewpoint and the position for the camera means we can put some really nice out of focus elements in front of the bird, nicely isolate it from its backdrop, and all of that helps to make a really effective image. They look black most of the time, but then when you get the light, they go with that beautiful,
it's gorgeous,
iridescent green.
And you think it looks good, and then suddenly the light changes ever so slightly, and it's just so much better.
Yeah, you notice when you get that little glint in the eye, and it magically lifts the whole image. Yeah, it's really nice bit of framing here.
So as with all photography, framing, light, it's just the same.
It's all the same. I think people like to get really hung up on technicalities, but nice fast shutter speed, pay attention to your focus. You don't have to make it any more than that. And we just need to find the right spot, study the subject. So, have you found your first wildlife photography experience then?
Surprisingly enjoyable. Success. Well done.
Won you over.
It's just, there's so much to it. It's not just the wildlife, it's like you say, it's the composition, the framing. You're trying to think about the colour, trying to think about the separation, and I didn't really think about that before. So yeah, really enjoyable. I really enjoyed it, and I'll come back on my own, I think.
Good. That's all we can want. Brilliant.
Exactly.
I kept my promise and did return alone to see how I fared without the convenience of a pro, well, Harry, holding my hand. These were my favourite shots from my visit.
Thank you to Think Tank for partnering with us on that feature. Both Harry and myself use Think Tank bags, which are ideal for all types of photography, but especially good for wildlife as they accommodate long lenses and are super comfortable when hiking to locations. If you fancy treating yourself to a new camera bag, then check out the Think Tank website to see everything they have on offer. The entire team here at Photography Online all use Think Tank bags because we consider them to be the best on the market. In fact, we recently gave away one of their Mindshift bags on our monthly podcast, so if you missed that, well, it's too late now. However, you don't need to make the same mistake twice, as we often give away great prizes on the podcast, which is free to listen to and is available on all the main platforms. This month's show has just gone live, so check that out when you want an hour of photography-related entertaining radio to listen to. All right, well, it is time for this month's special feature. Now, you told us how much you enjoyed the past 2 episodes with the solar eclipse and the best view in the world. This time, James thought he would show us how to approach and photograph strangers on the street when out on your travels.
One of the best ways you can document your travels to a foreign land is by photographing the people who call it home. After all, it's usually these people who bring atmosphere and character to the place. However, many photographers can be a little shy when it comes to approaching strangers in the street. If this is you, then I thought I would show you how I do it and give you a few tips which will hopefully increase your chances of getting some great portraits of the locals the next time you're abroad.
One of the things that you really need when doing this kind of photography is good communication skills. You need to show that you're confident, because then your subjects will be confident and the whole thing will work really well both sides of the camera. Now, my language skills are average at best. So I've enlisted the help of my good friend, Rafa here, who we met a couple of days ago. Rafa actually runs the hotel that we're staying in here in Havana and speaks brilliant English. Kinda. It's better than my Spanish anyway, and he's actually going to help me out here. Now, you can do this kind of photography without a Rafa, as it were, to, on your elbow all the time, but when you're filming and things, it does make it just a little bit easier to have someone with good skills. The red, it's amazing. Look, the red hat, red shirt, red shoes. So Rafa and I are just going to go and have a wander around Old Havana and see what we can find.
The most important thing when doing this is to have fun and enjoy yourself, as your subjects will sense this.
You could ask these 2 old ladies. So we'll get them from over there where they're in very bright sun, just to stand here against this nice coloured backdrop here, or in fact against this here, which I think will suit them a bit better.
It's critical to work out what you're going to do with your subject before you ask to take their photo, as this will give both of you that all-important confidence and prevent you from making bad decisions when the pressure is on.
92 years.
90.
Watch here how I quickly and quietly take a test shot to check the exposure.
Perfect, that'll be perfect, yeah.
It's all done in the blink of an eye.
So I'm just looking around to see when the light hits her face beautifully. That's it.
If you're shooting digitally, it's polite to show your subject a few shots whilst you say thanks. It's also nice to get an email address and send them a copy or 2 once you get home.
Beautiful light.
Beautiful light.
And it's because it's bouncing off this. So it's just bouncing onto this rail. And ideally I would have wanted her, I don't know, I couldn't get her in quite the right place, but it's not the end of the world. She's 92, so we'll make do with the background we had.
I prefer the quieter back streets, as it's easier to have conversations and connect with people. The really fun bit is just to wander about whilst constantly looking for folks and scenes that fit a few key criteria.
It's either to do with what they look like, the light, what they're wearing, the surroundings, the backgrounds, the whole story, or the light.
It's not long before I spot another great potential subject.
She doesn't have to move a muscle if she's happy.
You'll notice that I always stand next to Rafa. The camera is visible but not brandished. Remember, this needs to be fun and honest, both sides of the camera.
Just think her outfit's amazing.
The camera has rough settings in place, so I don't need to waste time if the subject agrees to having their portrait taken.
I'm just going to swap lenses over because I'm going to try and isolate her a little bit, because her outfit, the whole story, the best thing is her hair and her outfit. So I'm just going to swap over to an 85mm. And you're see. Gracias. I mean, look. It's good, huh? So one of the reasons we stopped this lady is not only her beautiful outfit and her fantastic hair and character, but it's principally because she's in the shade. There's an enormous light box the other side of the sun's coming over the top of this building and bouncing off a huge wall, street, bright coloured street, onto her hair, creating the most natural, beautiful, I mean, it's incredible, the light, basically, as you can see. Fantastic. So after that lovely lady, she had a certain amount of swag about her. Do you use that word? Yeah? Swag, definitely. Lots of swag. I've changed back to the 35mm because she was shot on an 85 in the end. And that's mainly because it gives me the most flexibility, because I'm not sure what's around any given corner, and the chances are, you know, we're going to be relatively close to our subjects, give them room to breathe, don't want to be too close or zoom in on them to start with. It can be a bit startling, so back to 35mm. If I'm confident this side of the camera, they'll be confident on the other side, as you saw with that lady.
As you've seen so far, when shooting in sunny conditions, regardless of where I find people, I'm always looking for suitable places that I can position them in the shade.
Maybe if we go, I'll have a look at this guy here. Just sit on the stairs or stand on the stairs, preferably sit if possible. If he's happy to, just be on the hook.
Never be afraid of asking people to change their location or position, if you think you can improve the photo by them doing so.
So you see, the further back he goes, actually the better the light's going to be, which is hard to believe, but it is true. See, he almost looks too dark there, right? He won't be. He'll be beautiful. I'm just going to ramp up the ISO quite a lot. So just swap sides here. And they'll get him to look at you, Santiago, to the camera. Yeah, there we go, and there's a lovely smile. And then we'll show him the picture, see what he thinks. Gracias, Santiago. Gracias.
It's easy to photograph people who are seemingly not doing much, but it's also fun to try and capture people doing their daily jobs, as this helps tell a story. These two guys repairing a classic car in the middle of the street are perfect, but with one of them lying on the floor it wasn't easy to get a natural shot, so I simply set one up, using the car bonnet as a framing tool.
If we're going to go down this road, it would really help just to have a big smile at the same time, I think.
That's too hard to ask. That's too hard to ask.
Fair enough. Shall I show you how we do it then? That's how you get the smile. That's really nice.
Using doorways to create soft directional light on your subject is a great tip.
So first of all, before I get involved in any comms at all with this young man, I'm just going to make sure the exposure is correct, because it's not an easy thing to photograph. But when you see the light on this gent's face, and just your eyes, yeah. There you go. It looks amazing. The light's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Raphael is very helpfully just exchanging email details here. The young guy, what was his name?
Judea.
I beg your pardon?
Judea.
Judea. The young guy Judea was just standing here as we walked past the Reds, and I hadn't actually noticed, but it just shows if you get off the street and come into the building and you look, the background is astonishing. The tones and textures of the background with him, the Reds and the Blues, make it a real, it's a great picture, that. So you will see the old lady over there, the one holding the broom leaning out. From here, the light doesn't look great on her, right? But I think if we go up closer to her, if she says yes, be really nice. She has a wonderful smile, huh? So here, what I'm going to do is use a bit of symmetry, rule of thirds, and keep everything very linear and straight, and let her do the talking.
Shortly after that, we passed a barber's, and in need of a bit of a grooming myself, I decided to go in and see what a Cuban cut was all about.
Scissors, perfect. Have I got nice light on me? I should have, coming through that doorway.
Never one to miss an opportunity of good light, I gave the camera to Rafa and told him to shoot my best side. I thought I got away with just a nick or two, until...
What's that?
It burns.
Burns a lot. What is that? Petrol?
That's petrol, yeah.
Excellent. Had your hair cut and a quick dousing of fuel.
Armed with my fragrance de petroleum, we continued to wander the streets, finding more suitable subjects everywhere. Try to avoid shooting from eye level whenever you can, as getting down low often provides more pleasing results. A good place to make easy connections with the locals is, of course, in a bar, as people here are generally not busy doing much else. If your subject is wearing glasses, pay particular attention to the reflections in front of their eyes. You must try and get that most dominant eye as clean of distracting reflections as possible.
Gracias, señor. Okay, gracias. El nombre? El nombre?
Armando.
Armando. Armando. Armando.
Once you have someone's permission to take their photo, don't panic and rush things. They'll want the photo to be good just like you do. So show some confidence and get that composition, the background, depth of field, the light, all working to their maximum potential. With refreshments taken care of, it was time to do a final walk around the streets of Havana.
Eduardo, hey.
One moment, please.
We're just about to take some pictures of Kira and Eduardo here. I've no idea why I've stopped them, except they look fantastic. And that is pretty much, that's all you need, really.
The rapport these two friends have is clearly visible in the final shot, and it's what really makes it.
Perfect. Gracias, thank you very much. Beautiful, huh?
Thanks.
Now that the sun had gone in, it was possible to photograph people standing right in the middle of the street.
So he's wearing glasses.
This gave me more opportunity to throw the background out of focus and help put more emphasis onto the subject.
There we go, use that blue. Gracias. We'll get her to walk just towards me very slowly. Okay, yeah, she can go now.
Once you get into your stride, you can try something slightly more ambitious, such as these moving shots of a girl getting into her stride wearing her bright pink trousers. Thanks to Rafa for all the help, and of course, a really big thanks to all the very beautiful people of Havana.
So I don't know about you, but I always find it a bit intimidating when it comes to photographing strangers. So seeing how James goes about it does help me see how easy it can be. Getting great photos of local people is a really important part of capturing the character of a place. So next time you're on your travels, it's certainly worthwhile giving it a go. So as I said earlier, I am in the medieval town of Albarracin in the heart of Spain. It is full of photographic potential with its twisting cobbled lanes and historic architecture. It's got a castle and the cathedral. There's also a river which runs through the valley, and above me there is another church, and on the hill up there is a monastery, and then the whole town is fortified by an ancient wall to keep all the Instagrammers and TikTokers out. We visit here each year with a small group of customers and pretty much have the place to ourselves. If you fancy joining us here or in any of the other locations that we've got scheduled in our calendar, simply get in touch to request full details. Most of our trips for the remainder of 2024 are now full, but there is some last minute space available to join Harry in Shetland from the 20th to the 26th of July. There are also still spaces on our big workshop, which takes place on our home island, the Isle of Skye, in December. Next year's calendar starts with a winter trip to Assynt in the Scottish Highlands. Then we've got our Isle of Lewis and Harris trip in February, our American Southwest trip and Namibia trips in April, and our Ireland Atlantic coast trip in May, before we're back here again in June. There's lots more on offer, so visit the MC2 Photography website to see the whole calendar. All right, well, we've got a bit of a treat for you. The Hasselblad X-pan camera is one of the all-time classic film cameras, but it's also one of the most expensive. If you want to get panoramic results on 35mm film, but don't fancy selling an organ to raise the funds for an actual X-pan, then Marcus has a cunning plan.
One of the most sought-after film cameras today is the Hasselblad X-pan. This was made in partnership with Fuji, who also have the same camera known as the TX1. Basically, if you're in Asia, then the TX1 will be more abundant, whereas in Europe and the Americas, the X-pan will be more common, but essentially, they're the same camera. A true marvel of engineering, the X-pan was groundbreaking in that it enabled the user to shoot both standard 35mm frames as well as double width frames, all interchangeably on the same roll. This was achieved by flicking a switch on the back of the camera, which changed the width of the film window, but crucially adjusted the position of the film accordingly.
For example, if I'm in panoramic mode and I take a shot, the film gets advanced to the next panoramic frame. But if I then decide that the next shot I want to take is in the 3:2 ratio, I flick this switch, the blinds come in to reduce the width of the window, and the camera cleverly rewinds the film by about 1 centimetre or so, just so that I'm not wasting any space between frames. If I were to change from the standard to the panoramic format, the camera does the opposite. It advances the film by about 1 centimetre or so to give room for the panoramic format.
It really was a major novelty when the original X-pan was released in the late 1990s. 5 years later, it was followed by the Mark II version, or the TX2, which is the one you see here. This had a few useful improvements, such as exposure information in the viewfinder and the ability to shoot double exposures.
Now, while I fully acknowledge and appreciate that the X-pan was, and still is, an amazing camera, for me, it has a bit of a weakness. You see, the only reason to shoot double width frames is to get a larger negative.
For anyone concerned about negative size, there are far bigger panoramic options on the market for either less or similar cost, at least for the equipment. The X-pan relies on batteries and contains a lot of electronics and moving parts, which will inevitably go wrong at some point. Once this happens, they're notoriously difficult or even impossible to fix. So if this goes wrong, it becomes a very expensive paperweight. Today, the Hasselblad X-pan is probably one of the most overpriced cameras in history. You see, if you want to pick up one of these in good condition with a standard 45mm lens, then you're going to need to expect to part with around 5,000. And that's regardless of whether you're talking in pounds, dollars or euros. That's a lot of money for a camera which only takes reasonably small negatives and could go catastrophically wrong at any moment. If one of these is on your list, then I have some good news. You can get just as good, possibly better panoramic results out of a 35mm film for just a fraction of the cost. Enter the Fuji GW690, a fully mechanical 6x9 medium format camera, meaning no electronics, motors or fancy stuff to go wrong. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, this is a medium format camera, and you would be right. However, for just a few pounds, you can convert this to a 35mm panoramic camera, which takes beautiful images, even bigger than the X-pan. The X-pan panoramic frames are 62mm wide, which isn't quite double the standard 35mm frame, but it's close. The Fuji will shoot frames 84mm wide. That means you'll get an extra 25% of length, and who wouldn't want that? But here's the best part. Over 25% of the area on 35mm film is taken up by the sprocket holes. This means that all 35mm cameras can only use 3/4 of the film to record the image. The height of the frame on the X-pan is always 24mm, regardless whether it's in panoramic or normal mode. Being a 6x9 medium format camera, the Fuji has no such height limitations, so we'll shoot over the sprocket holes for some really cool and arty results. Now, this might not suit all scenes or genres of photography, but if this is the case, you simply crop them out, and you're still left with a negative of 25x84mm, giving a super wide ratio of 3.3:1. The X-pan has 3 lenses, a 30mm, a 45mm and a 90mm in its lineup. The Fuji has a fixed lens, so you might think it's limited when it comes to focal length, but you'd be wrong. You see, this camera comes in 2 options, a standard 90mm lens, known as the GW690, and a wider 65mm lens, known as the GSW690. So you still have the option when purchasing your camera whether to go standard or wide. Here are the full frame equivalent focal lengths. These are shooting up in value, so if this idea has you interested, my advice would be to get in quick before prices go too much higher. I bought this one 3 years ago for about £600, but today you're probably looking at 4 figures to get one in this condition. This one I bought a couple of years ago for £400, and the price of that has doubled since. So not only do these cameras take wider panoramic 35mm images than the X-pan, but they're also a pretty good investment. Also known as the Texas Leica, there have been 3 versions of the GW690 and 2 versions of the wider GSW690. The original 1980s design is hard to beat, but it does have one annoying design flaw. All of these cameras have 2 shutter buttons, one on the top and one on the front. The Mark I has no lock mechanism, so it's all too easy to accidentally press one of these when you're putting it in or pulling it out of a bag, and then inevitably you waste a frame of film. The Mark III overcomes this problem with a lock on the shutter button, but this camera has one of the worst design flaws of any camera ever made. It has a built-in lens hood, which, when retracted, prevents access to the aperture and exposure time controls. You can't use filters with the hood extended, so you can see the problem. I found a novel way to solve this problem. It was called a hacksaw. While I don't advise sawing your beloved camera gear, this act of butchery did improve the usefulness of the camera by about 100 times. The Mark I has no built-in lens hood, so apart from the lack of shutter lock, is a much more practical camera. The Mark II, which I've never owned, also has the annoying retractable hood, but does have the shutter lock button. Whichever model you choose, they're all great cameras, so you really can't go wrong. So how do you convert this to take 35mm film? You'll need two things: a pair of these 35mm to 120 film adapters, and a roll of masking tape. The former can be a bit hard to find. I got mine from Analog Wonderland here in the UK. The masking tape can be purchased from any hardware store, and both items together should only cost a few pounds, although I can see the price of these increasing once they become in demand. Simply put the adapters into either end of your 35mm film cassette, and it will then fit perfectly into a medium format camera. But now we have a problem, because the 35mm film doesn't go to the edges of the film window, and as a result, the camera will think it has no film inside it, and these cogs at the top won't be turning as the film passes through the camera. But this is where the masking tape comes into play. We need to make this transporter rod large enough for the 35mm film to turn it as it passes over. This is done by simply rolling some tape onto the roller. I find that a length of around 40 centimeters does the job, but it really depends on the thickness of your tape. Once you have this in place, the rod will turn as the film passes, and the camera now knows that you have film loaded and will work as it should. Another couple of things: if you have a 20 centimeter length of spare film lying around, tape this to the start and you'll get an extra couple of frames out of a standard 36 exposure roll. Otherwise you'll waste the first 20% of the film on the take-up spool. I get about 15 frames before I hit the end of the film. You'll know when this happens, as the camera will stop winding on. Another important thing is to make sure that the pressure plate on the rear of the camera is set to 220, as there's no backing paper on 35mm film. Also, change the film counter to 16 exposures. The viewfinder will still be showing you the full 6x9 frame, so you can either put some tape on it to obscure the top and bottom 20%, or you can just do what I do and kind of guesstimate it. The width, however, is still accurate. If you plan to include the sprocket holes in your final prints, then make sure that important elements of the scene don't go over these. One final thing, once you've finished the film, then there's no way to rewind it into the cassette like there would be on a 35mm camera. So you're going to need a changing bag or a very dark room. I'm going to show you how to do it here on a test roll. Open the camera, take out the film cassette and take-up spool, and manually wind the film back into the cassette. Yes, it's a hassle, but think of the thousands of pounds you are saving over buying an X-pan. Plus, you get those lovely sprocket holes, which, let's face it, are priceless. Of course, you can get something similar with many other medium format cameras, but the Fuji 6x9 range of cameras will give you the biggest negative, and being rangefinders, they get as close as they can to the X-pan experience. Remember too, that with the Fujis, you'll also have the option to shoot lovely big 6x9 medium format frames. You try doing that on an X-pan.
Thank you to Ilford for partnering with us on that feature. As you saw, Marcus was using their FP4 emulsion, which is known for its fine grain and versatile performance. You can buy film, paper and chemicals direct from Ilford by going to ilfordphoto.com. I personally really like the sprocket hole shots, so I think I'll be giving those a go for myself. Thank you also to our local retailer, Ford's Photographic, for lending us the X-pan, because we certainly couldn't afford to buy one for ourselves. Next month, at what must be the world's best photography show, the deadline for the photo challenge expires? Will the boys manage to deliver 15 calendar-worthy shots to me before the clock strikes midnight? We'll also be looking at how to use wide-angle lenses properly, what the best option is when it comes to selling your unwanted photo gear, and we show you just how easy it is to develop film for yourself at home with no darkroom required. Don't forget, our PO Live show is available for all our supporters, but if you can't join us live, then you can still watch anytime on Catch Up. In fact, when you join, you automatically get access to all the past PO Live shows, so what are you waiting for? As I mentioned earlier, our latest podcast has also just gone live, so check that out. Visit our website, mc2photography.com, for information on all of our trips, plus to peruse our online shop, which sells everything from our magazine to pro spec tripods and filters. Whew, right, it's getting a bit windy. Until next time, take good care, but most of all, take good photos. Excellent.
Do you want to do another one?
Yeah, you've actually got shitting in your teeth.
Do I?
Yeah. Just part of your OT bar.
I think it's gone now. All right.
That's all right, yeah.
All right.